the fourth Ajay Gandhi Memorial Lecture. As all of you know, and for those of you who don't know, Ajay Gandhi was the co-founder of Manthan along with Vikram. And in fact, in some ways, in the last decade, he was probably the driving force, and I think Vikram would agree there. He was the one who was very energetic about building it up, and he was very, very active in COVID. He was the one who took this online almost every week, and he created this institution along with Vikram. And of course, as you know, he was also associated with the Hyderabad Literary Festival, and he was very much a part of the city's cultural landscape. And 4 years later, we still miss him, but the institution he created still lives. Today, to deliver the memorial lecture is Mr. Ashok Lavasa, who, again, I think all of you know of. He has had a very distinguished career as a civil servant and later elsewhere. He is from the Haryana cadre. He has held senior positions in the government of Haryana and the government of India as Secretary in the Union Government, Finance and Expenditure, Environment, Civil Aviation also. He was also involved in negotiations, international negotiations related to the environment, including the all-important COP21, which led to the Paris Convention, which of course is now somewhat in tatters. Later, he was vice president of the Asian Development Bank. He's also an author. He's an author of 2 books, and he recently co-authored a book with Ms. Novel Lavasa, who is also with us. So he's a person of multi-talents, and I'm sure Ajay would have been very happy to have heard him. And today he will talk about, again, a subject which we are all talking about, which many of us are concerned about, is about the working of the Election Commission. The title is The Election Commission, a Sentinel Under Attack. The title suggests itself what the issues are, and we are very, very happy that he has taken time off to come from Delhi and to deliver this lecture. Mr. Lavasa.
Good evening, everyone, and namaskar. So first of all, I would like to express my gratitude to the foundation, to Manthan, for giving me this opportunity. It's really a privilege to be associated with a cause as good as has been espoused by Ajay, whose memorial lecture it is today. I didn't know much about him till I was told I was invited for this lecture. And then I realized, having read a little bit, what a multifaceted personality he was. So I pay my tribute to him. Manthan, the conversation or the dialogue that has been started, I saw the billboard outside. It talks about open hearts and open minds. And that, I think, is something which is extremely desirable, not only these days, it always has been. But let me also pay my tribute to a person who also represented an open mind, Professor Jagdeep Chokar. He passed away yesterday. And for all those who have been students of elections or electoral reforms, you would be familiar with him, the kind of crusade that he led. He was a professor of the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, and it was he who founded, along with others, the Association of Democratic Reforms that has been in the forefront of not only electoral reforms, advocacy, actually filing several petitions before the court, obtaining seminal judgments on many of the vital issues that affect elections and the right to vote. He passed away, unfortunately, yesterday in the morning. And the thing which really struck me was that all the good work that he did, of course, everyone speaks of. But he did something which is exemplary, that he donated his body to the Lady Hardinge College. Very few people do that. And if I may also narrate how strange life is, he was to deliver a talk in the India International Center on the 20th of this month, next week. And I was to deliver a talk on the 4th of October. Day before yesterday, I got a call from the organizers saying that Mr. Choker has expressed his inability to deliver a talk because he's not feeling too well. So can you step in for him? And I agreed, little realizing that the next day he would be no more. So I pay my tribute to both Mr. Choker and Mr. Ajay Gandhi. And as a mark of tribute, please allow me to read a brief passage from a book that I wrote in 2021. And the reason why I decided to read this passage, you will know once you hear me. This book, incidentally, is inspired by a diary which my father wrote in the last 3-4 years of his life. So it's a small passage that I'm reading from the preface of the book. It says, "Tell me, sir, in which field could I make a great career?" The child asked. The father replied, "Be a good human being. There is a huge opportunity in this area and very little competition. Honesty and truth are not merely ideals that remain elusive. They form the survival kit of many whose lives don't seem extraordinary because they are not popular. These ordinary lives," and the title of this book is An Ordinary Life, "these ordinary lives may not be well known or heroic in popular perception. In their own limited world, and for those who come in contact with such men and women, such people are individuals who have lived life on their own terms. They have faced trials and tribulations, traumas and triumphs, but remained afloat because they had a hard inner core. They may not be icons, recognized and idolized. Their life inspires because it's a vindication of certain lasting values that survive in every society. Such lives provide hope and keep us connected with the unforeseen forces that govern us. There are many in every society who think with their heart and feel with their mind. They keep working silently and selflessly. They could be around us helping the marginalized. They could be away from the public gaze tilling soil or tending trees. They could be unidentified pillars of the system. They may be those writing but not being read. They could be waging little battles unrecognized. These are the people who rise above their situations, unmindful of their own struggles. They hear the unspoken and respond before being beseeched. We all have stories. Not all of them are told in public. They are preserved in households and narrated in families and mohallas as tales of inspiration. These stories are relevant. Their relevance keeps growing as the stories spread and lead to more conversations between parents and children. These conversations, and I mean the kind of conversations which Manthan promotes, the Manthan Samvad, these conversations are important for individual relationships, for families, for societies, and for systems. parents, priests, scientists, academicians, managers, administrators, and leaders must engage in such conversation in order to maintain their social contract. A well-meaning conversation can never be a challenge to authority. And I think the need for having these conversations in these days and times is become all the more relevant. And I say this because I find that in the last few years, all over the world, there is so much of bewilderment. I think I feel very puzzled on how to interpret the events which are happening all over the world. I don't confine myself to India, but when I see the geopolitics, the way it is evolving, so it is a time when friends are behaving like foes, and foes are pretending to be friends. It is as important for individuals as it is for the nations. I feel terribly confused, and I am reminded of what William Butler Yeats wrote more than 100 years back, where he said that, and allow me to just read 2 lines of a wonderful poem that he wrote. You might know that he was an Irish poet, and he was very active during the Irish Rebellion in the early part of the 20th century. So a small stanza from one of his poems says, "Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity." Please mark these words. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. So how do you interpret what is happening? How do you frame this in your mind to behave in this society? I remember a professor from Harvard, Yashka Monk, he wrote a book, I think 7 years back, called People versus Democracy. And I'm bringing this about because that is the subject of our discussion today. And I feel that if in the 21st century, one of the big challenges before us is how to preserve democracy. The 20th century we all hailed as a century that ushered in the democratic system of governance in many countries in the world. But already in the 21st century, we are seeing, apart from environment or globalization, one of the big challenges before us is how to preserve democracy. And the problem is, as Yashka Monk says in his book, which is extremely well researched, he talked about trends in which authoritarian governments will appear to be liberal and democracies will appear to be illiberal, or not appear to be, will tend to be illiberal. There are various examples all over the world you can see. And very interestingly, yesterday, if you saw in the Indian Express, Pratap Bhanu Mehta, who is one of the finest intellectuals of modern times, he is talking about the exhaustion, democratic exhaustion. And he cites John Stuart Mill, who said that democracies have typically have a life of 40 to 50 years. Then they become weak. Sometimes they die. But the same is applicable to other forms of governance as well. So it's a very interesting analytical article which I would recommend you to read. Now, India, which we pride ourselves to be not only a democracy for the last 74, 75, 77 years, but we say that we are one of the first republics in the world. And one of the institutions which has enabled us to claim that has been the Election Commission of India. Because quite unlike in many other countries, our founding fathers created an institution, the founding fathers of the Constitution, created an institution which is unparalleled in the world in terms of its authority and in terms of its jurisdiction. Because there are many countries that have election commissions, but they don't have the kind of sweeping authority which the Election Commission has been bestowed with. When we were discussing the Constitution in the Constituent Assembly, some of you might of course know that the Constitution was adopted on the 26th of November 1949. It was enforced from the 26th of January 1950, but some articles in the Constitution, those pertaining to the citizenship, and Article 324, which creates the Election Commission of India, they were enforced from 26th November 1949 itself. And that is the reason why Election Commission of India was established a day before the 26th of January 1950. It came into being a day before that. So what did the Constitution do? It created this body and it entrusted it with three responsibilities. One is preparation of electoral rolls. Second, conduct of elections. And third, during the elections, to ensure that there is a level playing field. And for this purpose, they were made responsible for the superintendence, direction, and control of the electoral process in the country. We need not go into all the details. There are 5 or 6 articles which capture the entire design of this institution. One thing which I always argue, and which not many people understand, is that there are many institutions created by the Constitution. The Parliament is one, the Comptroller and Auditor General, the state legislatures, the Finance Commission, the High Courts, the Supreme Court. These are all institutions created by the Constitution. All these institutions, their area of work is connected with the government's working. Take the Parliament, it legislates bills which are presented before it by the government. Sometimes it takes a private member's bill, but that apart, by and large, it takes up bills which are brought before the members of Parliament or the members of Legislative Assembly by the governments. The High Courts, the Supreme Courts, bulk of their work is connected with decisions that are taken by the government. So they adjudicate upon these decisions apart from interpreting laws. Take the Finance Commission. The Finance Commission goes into the principles of allocation of financial resources between state, federal, and state governments. Same is the case with tribunals. The Comptroller and Auditor General is auditing the expenditure incurred by the government. There is only one institution, namely the Election Commission of India, whose working is not related to the government. And when I say related, I'm not saying it is not dependent. It is intrinsically dependent on the government. But its work is directly related to the citizens of India. And that is where I said that if they are in charge of superintendence, direction and control of the electoral process, which involves preparation of electoral rolls, which involves conduct of elections, and which involves maintaining a level playing field during elections. So in that sense, they are dealing directly with the citizens of the country. Of course, they are governed by the laws which are made by the parliament. But in their working, they need not depend on what the government functioning is. They depend on the government machinery. But there also the Constitution takes care to say that they will request the President or the Governor for providing the resources they require to carry out their work. And that is how you find that all these preparation of electoral rolls or conduct of elections is done by the state machinery. And when I say state, it means both Government of India and the state governments. So that is the nature of this institution which was conceived, and that indeed has been the way it has evolved. The topic that we have identified today, and I was told by one of my friends that, why do you call Election Commission a sentinel? It's more appropriate to call it an umpire. Yes, it is an umpire when it is dealing with people who are contestants. But it is also a sentinel because it is the protector and the gatekeeper of the electoral rights of the citizens of India. It decides the manner in which people will be included in the electoral roll, by which they will be enabled to exercise their right. The present dispute which is going on, and I think I find it hard to recall any single decision of the Election Commission of India in its entire, I would say, glorious history, where a single decision has led to so much of controversy. And that decision is the special intensive revision which has been carried out in Bihar. And I'll go into the pros and cons of it also. But before I do that, let us try to understand what is eligibility. Because in the press note which was issued on the 24th of June 2025 by the Election Commission, it says, and very rightly, that they don't want any ineligible person to be in the electoral roll and any eligible person to be excluded. Nobody can dispute that. So who is eligible is defined in Article 326. You need to be a citizen. You need to be 18 years old, originally 21, now 18. You should not be disqualified under any law. And you should not be of insane mind, which will be declared by an appropriate medical authority. So these are the 4 conditions of eligibility as per the Constitution. When the preparation of the first electoral roll was started, and by the way, it was not started in 1950, it was started much earlier, even when the Constituent Assembly was in authority. They had constituted a subcommittee which, in preparation of adoption of the Constitution, did some work to prepare the electoral rolls. But when the Constitution was adopted and enforced, the first Chief Election Commissioner was Mr. Sukumar Sen, who was earlier the Chief Secretary of West Bengal. So he was appointed. And I think when the debate took place in Parliament at the time of enforcing the constitution, the Prime Minister had expressed a hope that the first election will take place in March of 1950. But when Mr. Sukumar Sen took over, and I think he took over on 21st March 1950, he said that the heart of any election is the electoral roll. So we have to first ensure whether the electoral roll has been properly prepared. And as I said, some work had been done. So he went into the electoral roll, and you probably may not know, not all of you may know, that he went from state to state trying to see how the electoral roll was prepared. And among several things, one of the things he discovered was that there were many entries made in the electoral roll where the name was not given. It was only mentioned wife of so-and-so, daughter of so-and-so. So he said, no, we cannot have any name where the person is not free to disclose her identity. She must disclose her identity. Only then she will be in a position to exercise her free will. Anyway, long story short, the elections did not take place in 1950. They did not take place in 1951 in the early part, and there were announcements repeatedly by the Prime Minister that elections will be held in the near future. But the Election Commission of India first tried to ensure that there is a sound electoral roll. Finally, of course, the elections took place, I think, beginning September of 51. They went on till February of 1952. The results were declared in, I think, April of 52. So there is a very interesting book written by an Israeli author. I think her name is Ornit Shani, if I'm getting it right. It's called How India Became a Democracy. And it's one of the seminal works in which she tries to capture how electoral rolls were prepared. How in a country where the rate of literacy was about 16%, and you adopted universal adult franchise, which probably was not dared by any other democracy from the beginning. We all know USA and UK took so long to grant voting rights to women. But here was a country which was daring to give universal adult franchise to everyone, whether you are landed or you are landless or you're poor or rich or educated, uneducated, everybody had equal voting rights. And she recounts in this book, for example, what efforts were made to include people who slept on the pavements of streets in cities. She talks about Mumbai. What efforts were made to include people in electoral roll who were staying in open spaces in the city of Mumbai, not even paying rent to the municipal corporation. But the Election Commission said that is a separate issue. How should their names be enrolled? That is more important. Because whatever be your status, you have a voting right. And you cannot exercise that voting right unless your name is included. So, in fact, there was a very interesting reference to the levels of literacy in India and how confident the members were, whether people whose literacy levels were so low, who were not citizens, they were earlier subjects of some kingdom or the other, who did not even understand what electoral rights are. So what did the Constituent Assembly say about that? And I want to read out this passage. This is a speech delivered by Dr. Ambedkar on 25th of November, 1949. And he says, on the issue of universal adult franchise, despite illiteracy, and I'm quoting him, "I have no doubt in my mind that if things are explained to them, they will not only be able to pick up the technique of election, but will be able to cast their votes in an intelligent manner. And I have no misgivings about the future on that account. I cannot say," and please listen to this carefully, "I cannot say the same thing about the other people who may try to influence them by slogans and by placing before them beautiful pictures of unpracticable programs." This is 1949. And when it came to discussing the educational qualifications for the legislators, so it is not only that literacy was a cause of concern for electors, but even for the legislators, he says, "There are only two regrets which I must share with the honorable members. I would have liked to have some qualifications laid down for members of the legislatures. It is anomalous that we should insist upon high qualifications for those who administer or help in administering the law, but none for those who made it, except that they are elected." But then he goes on to say, "A lawgiver requires intellectual equipment, but even more than that, capacity to take a balanced view of things, to act independently, and above all, to be true to those fundamental things of life. In one word, to have character." And when you read this in the documents available in the Parliament, after this, in the bracket, it says, "Here, here." So there was a lot of cheer. "It is not possible to devise any yardstick for measuring the moral qualities of a man, and so long as that is not possible, our constitution will remain defective." So the reason why I read this out was that in spite of the levels of literacy or illiteracy, the Election Commission went about including people in the electoral roll. The principle that was followed was that it is our responsibility, our duty, to ensure that every person who is eligible is included in the electoral roll. It is not his or her responsibility to apply to be included. So that is how this exercise was conducted. And if you read the reports of the first elections in India, that time the census had not taken place when these rolls were prepared, because the 51 results were out much later. But interestingly, when the census figures were revealed subsequently, they made a comparison, which is what we call the EP ratio, the electors to population ratio. And they found that it matched very closely the population which was in 1951 about 21 years of age. That number was something like 18 crore something. And the number of electors which ECI had managed to include was 17 crores, 89 lakhs or some such number, close to 18 crores. But the margin was only about 60 to 70 lakhs, number of people who were left out according to the census. So at a time when people were moving around from one place to another, one region to other, countries, new countries had been formed, and nobody had any document to establish their citizenship, still an exercise was conducted in which people got into the electoral roll. Now that 18 crore or 17 point some crore people have swelled to almost 99 crores. And this exercise has been done not on the basis of anybody's whims and fancies. They have been done according to transparent procedures which were evolved by the Election Commission of India in keeping with the laws of the land. In such a huge exercise, there could be errors. Nobody says that this exercise is foolproof. But the fact is that there was an approach which Election Commission followed, which was an inclusive approach. It was an approach which was friendly. And the reason why we are discussing all this today is because the manner in which the special intensive revision of electoral rolls is being conducted, will be conducted throughout the country in times to come. So there are three major things which we need to consider. One is, what is the purpose of the special intensive revision? The second is, what are the principles behind this intensive revision that ECI has said it will follow? And the third is, what are the procedures which are adopted? So as far as the purpose is concerned, as I said, if you want to include all eligible persons, nobody can have any dispute. If you want to exclude any ineligible person, again nobody can have any dispute. So on the purpose, I don't think there is any dispute, disagreement. However, in the case of Bihar, there are disagreements on the timing. And this issue was also flagged in the Supreme Court, where 10, 11 petitioners filed their petitions. And the timing issue has two dimensions. One is whether the time given for the revision is adequate. And the second is whether the timing of the revision just before the state assembly elections is right or is proper. So on both these counts, I think what has happened is that the abruptness of the announcement, because when you carry out a revision on this scale, it's not like going for an income tax search or a raid. It has to be an open exercise, fully involving people, informing them that, look, this is what we are going to do, this is the time you have to prepare, and we will start this exercise from such and such date. But this exercise was announced on the 24th of June and commenced immediately thereafter. And that too, the time given, according to the Election Commission, was some 90 days or a little more than 90 days. Whereas in the past, in 2003, when the intensive revision was carried out, the time taken was about 8 months. Now, that is something which is under a cloud because nobody has seen the order of 2003. And this is one area which has given rise to a lot of controversies. People said that, why don't you show us what is the order of 2003, how intensive revision was conducted. If you have departed from that procedure, please give the reasons why you have departed and explain it to the people. But unfortunately, that order is not available. So that has created a lot of doubt. In any case, the other questionable thing, and now I'm talking about the principles, is that here is a process in which the onus of proving citizenship or proving your eligibility is cast on the electors. Whereas earlier, it was the system, the machinery, which was taking the responsibility of including everyone, and the procedure as laid down in the Representation of People Act and as explained in the registration of electors rules, all those procedures, they say that the person who wants to be included in the electoral roll, he just makes an undertaking that I am a citizen of this country. He gives proof, 2 types of proof or 3 types of proof. One is about his identity. The second is about his birth, date of birth, and the third is about his ordinary residence. So I think here is something which the people of this country must understand, that Election Commission genuinely has a dilemma. Because whereas the Constitution mandates that only citizens can be enrolled, there is no document provided by the government in India to anybody by which he can establish that yes, this is the proof of my citizenship. Unless you have acquired citizenship through a process. In that case, you are registered and you are given a certificate. So somebody might argue that a passport, yes, but passport you can get only, Government of India can give you a passport only if you are a citizen. And you can say that because I have an Indian passport, I am a citizen of India. But by that logic, the photo identity card, the voter's card, is also a proof of citizenship. Because that voter card you cannot get unless you are eligible, and the eligibility condition is citizenship. So in the absence of the government giving you or the sovereign giving you any documentary evidence, conclusive documentary evidence, how does the Election Commission establish or convince itself that you are a citizen? But that approach which has been adopted is one of presumption. Because a hypothetical question could be that if I am born in India, if I don't have any land, if I don't go to any school, if I don't take benefit of any government programs, can I not vote? You can. You cannot be deprived of your voting right just because you don't possess any of these things. So that's a hypothetical question. And that is why the presumption was that you are a citizen of this country, you live here, and unless it is otherwise established. So in the Representation of People Act and in the rules which I mentioned, there is a provision that if you have erroneously entered the electoral roll, how can you be removed? That procedure is also given. So as far as the principles are concerned, one is that the onus in this exercise is substantially shifted, transferred to the citizens. And that is why people cite the example of the United States of America, where despite all the progress and literacy and whatever, their enrollment EP ratio is about 75%. Because there, it is the citizen who must approach the authorities that please give me a right to vote. In India, it's the other way around, and that's why our EP ratio has been traditionally 99%. The second thing which I think controversial, which happened in this exercise, was that for the first time, the Election Commission used a phrase which it had never used in the past. Because revision is a part of normal activities. There are different kinds of revisions which are provided for in the rules. There is a summary revision, there is an annual revision, there is an intensive revision also. There is no special intensive revision. This nomenclature has been used for the first time. But it is not only the nomenclature. What the notification of 24 June said and did was it divided the existing electors into two groups. Those who were registered till 2003 and those who were registered after 2003, all of them, 7.89 crore, are electors admitted to the electoral roll after following due process. But for the purpose of this exercise, you divide them into two categories. And what do you say? You say that those whose names existed in the 2003 electoral roll, and as I said, 2003 was the cutoff because that is the year in which the last intensive revision was carried out in Bihar. So they said that all those who existed in 2003, their existence on the in the electoral roll will be a probative evidence of eligibility. So far, I think no problem. But then they say it will be a presumption of citizenship. And what it meant was that all those who entered the electoral roll after 2003 will have to prove that they are citizens. Because the Election Commission used the word presumption of citizenship. This was never done in the past. The other thing which was done is that those who were entered after 2003, they were also divided into three categories. Those who were born before July 1987, those born between 1987 and 2004, and those who were born after December 2004. What was the rationale of this categorization? Very simple. They aligned it to the Citizenship Act. This was also not done earlier by the Election Commission. And these three categories have been asked to provide different kinds of documents. Those before 1987 will only give a copy of the electoral roll of 2003 that we existed in that electoral roll. Those who were born between 87 and 2004 will have to give evidence of not only themselves but about one of their parents. And those born after 2004 will have to provide evidence of eligibility of himself or herself and both the parents. So this created a lot of difficulty, and immediately there was a reaction. People didn't get into the principles of the electoral roll. They got into the practicality. Because in a state like Bihar, I think the Hindu did some analysis to show that only so many people will possess one of the 11 documents which was prescribed by the Election Commission. That was one difficulty which was flagged. The other, of course, was that there are floods, and how do you expect people to procure these documents? The third was that there are 20% or more people in Bihar who are migrants. And how do you expect them to come back and provide these documents to you? So these types of issues were raised. Eventually, what we see is the Supreme Court did two things, and that is where we come to the procedural part. I said there are three things. On the procedure, whereas the law as enshrined in Representation of People Act and the procedure given in the Registration of Electors rule says that once a person is admitted in the electoral roll, if you delete his name or her name, there is a certain procedure to be followed. Primarily, you cannot delete anybody's name till you serve a notice on that person. But in this case, what was done was that they said we will publish a draft electoral roll on the 1st of August. So all those people, okay, let me step back. The procedure which was evolved this time was that based on the data available with the Election Commission, there will be a pre-filled form. That pre-filled form will be downloaded either by the BLO or by the elector herself or himself, and that form will have a photograph which is available in the Election Commission's database. That form will be given to the elector. The BLO will go house to house, give that form to the elector. That will be his first contact with the elector. In the second round, he will go and get that form back. And what was expected, the elector had to sign, give a latest photograph, and give one of the 11 documents which was prescribed back to the BLO. If he didn't succeed, the BLO will go a third time, and that is how this exercise went on for a month, the last date being 25th of July. Whatever forms were given back, they were to be included in the electoral roll. So now what happened? First thing which happened was that no sooner this issue about non-availability of documents was raised, immediately the ECI modified its procedure and they said, no, it doesn't matter. You may not submit the documents, you just have to sign the form and give it back to us. If you give back the form, we'll include you in the draft electoral roll. So this creates a situation, eventually, as you might know, that when the draft electoral roll was published, out of 7.89 crore, 7.24 crore names existed. Now, I'm not going into the veracity of who was excluded, whether it was for a genuine reason or not, that we need not get into. I'm only talking about the procedural aspect. So theoretically, here is what this procedure could do. If you were enrolled as an elector in 1951, the first electoral roll, and you continued to be on the electoral roll in 2003 and also in 2025. By the way, in Bihar, in preparation for the assembly elections, as per the established procedure, the state CEO, Chief Electoral Officer, had published an electoral roll in January of 2025, which was published after carrying out the summary revision, which is mandated before any election. So if your name existed in 1951, in 2003, and in 2025, but if for some reason you do not sign that form and give it back, you will be excluded. So how fair is that? It might be defended by the Election Commission to say that this is legal. What we are doing is legal. But is this fair that you exclude a person so easily from the electoral roll? But this is not the only problem. The other thing is the purification of electoral rolls, which is being attempted by the Election Commission. How does this procedure guarantee purification? Because what you are doing is you are downloading the existing data and you are giving it to the elector to sign and resubmit. So whatever discrepancies are there in your data, you will inherit. The new electoral roll will inherit those discrepancies. So how is this purification? Whereas in the past, and as the Election Commission has now pointed out, that as a result of this first stage of exercise, they were able to remove 65 lakh of people on account of some of them died, 22 lakh people died. How did you know that they are dead? Because there was no provision for the BLO to go and survey. 35 lakh or so are shown, initially they were shown to have permanently migrated. How did you find out that they had permanently migrated? Because there was no provision for a field survey. Very soon it was realized, and then they said, no, permanently migrated, oblique forms not delivered, oblique forms not received, etc. So, and then there were some 7 lakh people who they say they are duplicates. They are duplicate entries. So the point is that the procedure which had been followed in the past, in 2003, and I am saying this on the basis of speaking to people who are involved in this exercise. What used to happen was that the field enumerator, he was not called BLO at that time, he would carry the name of all the electors in his jurisdiction, typically about 12 to 1500 people, and he would have a form house-wise, that in this household there are 6 names that figure. So he would go to that house, talk to the head of the family or others in the family to say whether these 6 people live in this house. And if they live in this house, is this the correct name? Is this the correct age? So there was a column below that in which he was supposed to enter the name according to what he has found out during the field survey. So this is how the entire procedure this time is different, and that is what has raised a lot of hue and cry. Then in the first stage, when people submitted their forms without any documents, because they said please submit forms no matter whether you have documents or not. And the instructions of the Election Commission said that the BLO has to make a recommendation based on the forms that he receives. So on what basis will I make a recommendation if there are no documents? Anyway, now the data about the number of people who actually submitted the documents after that exercise, because then 1 more month was given for people to submit documents. We don't know how many people have submitted documents. There is one number that has been given, but we don't know whether these documents are one of the 11 which were prescribed by the Election Commission. So later, the Supreme Court said that please accept Aadhaar. Now, the problem is the following. Number one, your procedure allowed you to delete 65 lakh names without giving them notice, because technically Election Commission said we are not deleting their names. We are rewriting the electoral roll. We are preparing it as if it is a fresh electoral roll. So these people are not included in the electoral roll, and we are not obliged to publish the names of people who are not included in the electoral roll. Because those who have not included their names, the first time voters, we don't publish their names. So these 65 lakh names are obliterated, they are not deleted. And if they want to be re-included, then there is a procedure by which they will sign, fill Form 6, etc. That's the normal procedure. The second thing was, as I said, and this is where the Supreme Court intervened. They said that, by the way, the 11 documents that you mentioned in your original list, none of them is a proof of citizenship. So why are you excluding Aadhaar? And you are dealing with people who are already in your electoral roll. You are not recognizing EPIC. That's a separate issue. Election Commission defended why they are not recognizing EPIC. But why are you not including Aadhaar? So what I am trying to say is that the territory which Election Commission entered by going into the determination of citizenship is a very slippery territory. Election Commission had avoided this and had worked under the belief that we are including people in that exercise. If some ineligible person has come, somebody wants to raise an objection, please come and tell us that so-and-so is not a citizen of this country. And then we'll find a way to exclude him. So this is the crux of the revision exercise. Now the point is, and I think that is the serious point, that this exercise will be done throughout the country. So how will it be carried out? And that is where I feel that Election Commission of India, Supreme Court, and all others who are involved in this, I think you have to approach this exercise in a very constructive frame of mind. And if indeed you want to carry out an special intensive revision, then the methodology has to be very carefully worked out. It can be debated whether the exercise is required or not, because in 2003 or around that time, when there was computerization of rolls, the Election Commission took a conscious decision that henceforth we might not require this kind of intensive revision, because we are computerizing our rolls. There will be rectification which we can do, but we need not do this kind of intensive revision except in areas, specific districts, specific constituencies where you receive complaints that there is large-scale contamination of electoral roll. So in that, you have the powers to carry out intensive revision. Now, this is one sort of, according to me, a cloud which has come over the institution because of the manner in which this exercise has been handled so far. I'm sure there is a room for improvement. But then there are 2-3 other things which I want to highlight. I don't know how much time I have taken already, but let me quickly go over 3 or 4 things. One is that the commission, I think it had 2 or 3 strengths. It still has, by the way. One strength is that it is an organization which runs on the basis of standard operating procedures, which are transparent, which are so elaborate that sometimes you might feel, how should you explain these minor details to everyone? But then Election Commission has always believed in crossing the T's and dotting the I's and telling the machinery repeatedly that this is how you have to do things. And almost all its procedures are publicly understood. They at least try. And for the last about 15-20 years, they even started a program called Systematic Voters Education Program, in which they try to educate the voters. So that is why an organization which has established its reputation on the basis of the strength of its procedures and transparency of its procedures should follow procedures which people are finding it difficult to comprehend. And there have been other issues associated about disclosing data, voter turnout data, about disclosure of Form 17C. So we need not go into these issues. If somebody has questions, I can always answer those questions. The second thing which I think Election Commission always treated as its real strength was the civil society organizations. They always worked in collaboration with the civil society organizations, and they accepted whatever suggestions came to them from either these organizations, members of people, political parties, approached many issues with a very open mind. Of course, Election Commission has its own limitations in the sense that they have to go by the law of the land. So they don't have power of legislation. So if they want legal changes, then they are bound. But in that area, I don't mind saying it in front of you, that Election Commission would support civil society organizations which file petitions in the court for electoral reforms, as long as they found that it was the right reform required. Somehow, in the last few years, that relationship has come under a lot of strain. And there is a lot of mistrust which has happened between civil society organizations and the Election Commission of India. We need not go into the reasons. And the third is, I think the political parties, their character, their composition, their way of working itself has undergone a lot of change in India. And here again, it might be useful to just draw your attention to what Dr. Ambedkar said about political parties. Again, I quote, "The working of a constitution does not depend wholly upon the nature of the constitution. The constitution can provide only the organs of state, such as the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. The factors on which the working of those organs of the state depend are the people and the political parties they will set up as their instruments to carry out their wishes and their politics. Who can say how the people of India and their parties will behave?" So that is an area in which I think a lot of challenges have come before the Election Commission. Take the Model Code of Conduct, for example. It was a document, a code which was evolved in consultation with the political parties. So the expectation would be that political parties would like to adhere to the letter and the spirit of the code of conduct. But increasingly you find instances where people are being clever. They want to adhere to the letter and violate the spirit. So in such a situation, it becomes very tricky for the ECI to catch hold of the violators. So that is one area. The other area also is that since independence, if you see the history of political parties, and I'm sure there are researchers here, please try and do research into the manifestos of all political parties in all elections. How many are talking about electoral reforms? Is it on their priority? The second thing, and this is actually very disturbing, that a few years back, there was a petition filed to bring political parties under the definition of public authorities and thereby cover them under the Right to Information Act. The Chief Information Commissioner of India passed an order saying that political parties are public authorities and subject to the right to information. And this is an order which has not been implemented, and there is a strong bond of agreement among all political parties not to implement this order. So, in such a situation, the Election Commission of India, which is the umpire or the sentry or whatever you want to call it, it finds it more challenging to regulate. Because if you are an umpire and if you have to preside over a game which is being played by different parties, and if all of them want to play foul, your task becomes all the more difficult. The final point I want to make is the controversy about the appointment of election commissioners. And here again, a cloud has come over the election commission for a decision which has been taken by the government or the parliament, not by the election commission. They are not responsible for this. But they are being seen through a prism because of a decision taken by the parliament. And what is that decision? The Supreme Court in 2023 passed an order constituting a selection committee for appointment of election commissioners, in which Chief Justice of India was included along with Prime Minister and Leader of Opposition. And they passed this order because there is a provision in the Constitution that Parliament has to make appropriate rules, and they said you have not made any of these rules for the last so many years. Now till you make a rule, this is going to be the selection committee. So the Parliament made a rule, excluded the Chief Justice, appointed the Leader of the Opposition, the Prime Minister, and one minister to be nominated by the Prime Minister. So the way in which this was structured, it obviously tilted towards the government. Now let's not forget that for the last 75 years, it is the government which has been making appointment of election commissioners. It is the government which made appointment of election commissioners who we idolize. Mr. Seshan was appointed by the government. There are so many others who are considered to be outstanding election commissioners. They were all appointed by the government. So this procedure, which was adopted by the government, I thought it was a self-goal. They could have easily included a third person. I'm not saying it should have been the Chief Justice. It could have been anyone. But broad-basing the selection process would have created more confidence. And I, for one, believe, not many people might agree with this, that a process does not guarantee the desired outcome. You may have whatever process, but it is not necessary that the procedure itself will guarantee what you want to achieve, and you want to achieve neutral, impartial, bold umpires which is the Election Commission of India. And let me end again by reading something from the Constitution, which is what the President just one second. Dr. Rajendra Prasad, he was presiding over this Constituent Assembly, and he said, whatever the Constitution may or may not provide, the welfare of the country will depend upon the way in which the country is administered. That will depend upon the men who administer it. If the people who are elected are capable and men of character and integrity, they would be able to make the best even of a defective constitution. If they are lacking in these, the constitution cannot help the country. After all, a constitution is like a machine. A constitution, like a machine, is a lifeless thing. It acquires life because of the men who control it and operate it. And India needs today, this was in 1949, but probably it could mean even today, and India needs today nothing more than a set of honest men who will have the interests of the country before them. Thank you very much.
Excellent lecture. It was an overview of both the making of the Election Commission, the working of the Election Commission, and then you brought us to today, the issues that we are facing. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions. Yes, I would only make one request to those who ask questions. Please make it brief, and please make them questions and not comments. Yeah, I just...
Of the motive. Purification or Shuddhikaran is it ever going to be inclusionary or is it going to be exclusionary? But second question is, today the ECI has submitted an affidavit before the Supreme Court saying that it has absolute discretion to determine when to do its electoral revisions, and that they will not entertain the thought of any systematic revisions, so that those who are left out could be brought back in, or those who should not be there can be eliminated. So this lack of a structure itself that they seem to refuse to do, refuse to implement, what does that reveal for the future?
Last word has not been said, and the law has not changed, right? So nobody has any doubt that the Election Commission has the powers that the law has provided it. So on that, I don't think there is any question. But this entire exercise and the way in which this has been conducted is still being adjudicated by the Supreme Court. So, you see, if you see what the Supreme Court has done so far, it said that please disclose the names of all the people you have deleted. So it's talking about transparency and restoring the right of people whose names have been deleted. Because as per the law, they should know why a name has been deleted. The second thing which they have done is that a document which is universally available, when I say universally, I think 99% is the coverage for Aadhaar. So whereas Aadhaar is not a proof of citizenship, but the Supreme Court said that similarly your 11 documents are also not proofs of citizenship. So we need not repeat that. So, and especially when you're dealing with people who you have already included in your roll. So for the purpose of that, you must accept Aadhaar as a document. Interestingly, please tell me if you know, at least I don't know, that out of all the names, 65 lakh, whatever number, do we know how many people have been excluded because they were ineligible in terms of Article 326? Not even one. If you are saying that 22 lakh people have died, that doesn't mean that they were ineligible. They are dead, so they have to be excluded. But that doesn't question their eligibility. If you are saying that 36 lakh people have permanently migrated, that also doesn't talk about their eligibility. It only means that they have shifted their place of residence. And the same is the case with duplicate voter entries. If a person is enrolled in more than one place, you're not saying he's ineligible. You're removing his name from one or more than one place. So what it means simply is that this whole exercise, which I call the winnowing exercise, have you been able to find even one ineligible person? Not yet. Whereas your existing laws provide that you can exclude ineligible people. So you could have excluded ineligible persons even in terms of your existing procedures. Why don't you follow that? Yeah, you follow that. I have a doubt that such and such person has actually acquired citizenship of another country, and his name is still there in the electoral roll. So the procedure, as the law as it obtains today, says that the onus of providing a proof that creates a doubt is on you, the objector. Once the authority receives that evidence, they will give that person a notice that, look, I have received this evidence against you. What do you have to say? And if upon inquiry you indeed feel doubtful, you refer it to the competent authority, which is not the Election Commission of India. And by the way, for those who may not know, in Assam, this procedure was adopted many years ago when, at the time of preparation of electoral roll, they created what is known as a D list, doubtful voters list. So at that time, similarly, people raised a doubt that so-and-so is not a citizen. So the Election Commission at that time took a view that, okay, we'll create a D list. And what it meant, if your name came in the D list, your right to vote is temporarily suspended till you get adjudication from a competent authority. And unfortunately, till today, we don't know how many people were in the D list, how many have got their right to vote restored, how many have been declared ineligible as non-citizens of India. We don't know that. And therefore, now when the NRC was done in Assam, and a list was created of 19 lakh, so many thousand people who were put in the category of non-citizens, the Election Commission said that no, we are not going to exclude anybody's name till the competent authority decides on their future. So leave it to the competent authority to decide. Basically, as I said, that ECI has followed a very amicable, inclusive, expansionary approach that, okay, get into the electoral roll, please get into the electoral roll. Whether you vote or not is another matter. This exclusionary approach is quite unique this time.
Hi, good evening, sir. Thank you for your answers. The first one is regarding electoral bonds. I'd like to know if you think that was a step in the right direction for our democracy, or it was completely detrimental to it, and if it's a step towards legitimizing lobbying in our electoral politics. Second question is, I'm sure you're aware about what's happening in Nepal. My question doesn't have anything to do with the protests, but yesterday the protesters actually elected the Chief Justice over an election that happened over Discord. Discord is a messaging app. and they elected an interim prime minister by voting through Discord. I'd like to know what you think as the ex-chief election commissioner of India. Is this a good way to elect a leader in a country? Thank you.
Commissioner. Electoral bond, I think the Supreme Court declared them as unconstitutional. But even before Supreme Court declared them as unconstitutional, I have been consistently of the view, I have written about it, that there is no justification for maintaining secrecy over who is donating to whom, especially when the state is giving income tax exemption. There is no parallel example in the income tax laws where the government gives exemption even if you don't disclose your identity or disclose the identity of the person to whom you are donating. So there is an anomaly. But in any case, for the sake of transparency, I think it is necessary for us to have a system in which we know who is contributing to whom. My view is very clear on that. What that system should be, I think it's a matter of debate. But since you have raised this issue, let me flag one other related issue. And that issue is that the political party, a political party, is not mentioned in the Constitution. What is a political party? In terms of its legal entity, there is no law. Is it a trust? Is it a society? Is it a company? Is it a non-for-profit company? We don't have law in which a political party's legal entity is recognized. And then you make this entity, which has no legal status, the receptacle of receiving tax-free money. How fair and legal or legitimate is this? Electoral bonds, for example, by its very nomenclature, were supposed to fund elections. Were they supposed to fund the existence of political parties and their infrastructure? It's a gray area. And there is a researcher, I think his name is Venkatesh Nayak. He published a paper recently actually giving out data from published sources on how, after succeeding elections, some political parties have enriched themselves. Their funds have increased after the elections. So it is what they have got is not equal to what they have spent. They have spent far less amount or declared to have spent far less amount in the elections. So I think this entire business of political funding requires a thorough discussion, and it is only after discussing with people who understand things that we will be able to bring out something more transparent. Now, as far as the Nepal thing is concerned, I don't think that I am in a position to comment on what has happened in Nepal. I don't even understand the entire legality of that process. So I think you will have to exempt me from that.
Why it is making it difficult in Bihar? Has anybody been included? It has rejected 55 lakh votes. Has any new voter been included?
That by its very definition, the intensive revision exercise is meant for both exclusion and inclusion. And one of the criticism which this exercise has faced so far is that this exercise was not meant to include people. The explanation for that given by the ECI is that inclusion in the electoral roll is an ongoing process. Even during this period and even now, those who want to be included, they can follow the existing procedure, fill Form 6, and if they are found eligible, their names will be included. So, as I said, that the nature of this exercise was different from what has been done in the past. By the way, the summary revision which was done before January 2025, when the electoral rolls were published for Bihar, in that exercise, the published data of the Election Commission would show that they included some 12 lakh people and excluded 4 lakh people. Something of that. I may be wrong in the numbers. But then every revision gives these numbers of the number of people admitted and the number of people left out. Just one more piece of information. A few years back, I think it was 2007 probably, when the Uttar Pradesh elections were taking place, so the Election Commission had received similar complaints that people are in the electoral roll, they don't even live there. So they created a system by which a list was created which was called SAD, shifted, absent, dead. Right? So they said that please, during the revision, make a list of all those people who are found to have shifted, or they were absent during the revision, or they were declared dead. But they will not be excluded from the electoral roll. This list was given to the presiding officer of every polling station. So he had a list, the electoral roll, and at the end was this list SAD. And they were told that if any one of these persons comes to vote, please carry out a thorough inquiry. Talk to people, find out from the respectables, and if you are satisfied, don't deny them their right to vote. We might have made a mistake, so that doesn't mean that somebody's right should be taken away. So that is the approach which has been followed in the past.
More than a lecture, I find it as a intellectual exercise done by you. And basically, it's quite interesting to hear that what the constitution makers predicted or they visualized. As you mentioned, Ambedkar quoted 2 times like character and intelligence of people, the electorate, and which turns right in next 4 to 5 years when he given an interview to BBC stating that India is merely a procedural democracy. So my question is that, as you said, in all the constitutional bodies, Election Commission is the only body which is not in consonance of what government or executives doing. But it is more in the business of upholding the democratic values and constitutional values, depending of democracy. So, in last 7 decades, is the role of Election Commission is just limited to the procedural aspects rather than looking into the character of the governing class. As Ambedkar and Dr. Rajendra Prasad both were echoing in the same direction. What constitution you make, it will not fruitful until the character of the governing class is in good faith. So, do you think it is just a procedural commission becoming day by day just a procedural commission rather than actual upholder of constitution and democracy.
So, nuances to your question. And as I said that the Election Commission of India, by the way, I have not said, nor can anyone say, that Election Commission is the only institution which has to uphold democracy. It is only responsible for conducting the process of democratically electing a government as provided in the Constitution. But the plenipotentiary powers that have been given to the Commission give it complete control, as I said, superintendence, direction and control in the process of conducting elections. So, one view can be that, look, you are a superman. Please solve all the problems of the country or the elections. The Supreme Court in one of the judgments said that Article 324 is a reservoir of authority, and Election Commission should not look for divine intervention with folded hands. The powers are with you. Please exercise your powers. And by the way, Election Commission has exercised its powers off and on, Article 324. All the penalties that it imposes, or when in 2019 the release of some films was stopped, it was under Article 324. But, and also the analysis of the quality of democracy, which is done by various institutions abroad, including the economists. They keep publishing on where India figures in the ranking of being a democratic country. So, but that criteria has number of parameters, and those parameters are not all related to elections. The way in which elections are conducted, have been conducted in India, was described once by Hillary Clinton as gold standard, right? So, on the procedural aspects, on the inclusivity that we spoke about, Election Commission has got a good track record, but conducting regular elections is not what constitutes everything about a democracy. Democracy means many things more, in which Election Commission may not have a substantive role to play. Even in terms of pursuing electoral reforms, there is only an extent to which Election Commission can go. And if you look at the track record, you will find numerous instances where a list of 40, 46 electoral reforms have been repeatedly presented to the government, proposed to the government by the Election Commission, that these reforms should be carried out. But if the government doesn't do that, then I don't know what the Election Commission can do. Can it say that we will not conduct elections if you don't do these reforms? So I think we have to also understand the limitations of the institution. Whether you want to condone the limitations of individuals, that is your choice. But there are some parameters within which the Election Commission operates, and even the court, while upholding, the Supreme Court, while upholding the supreme authority given under Article 324, it has also held that it cannot, Election Commission cannot take a decision which is in conflict with any existing law. So, for example, if propaganda films are made by the celluloid world and they are released before the elections, to influence voters, what can the Election Commission do? If crores of rupees are spent on government advertisements before the election process is announced, what can the Election Commission do? And many of these ads are meant to propagate individuals. They are not meant to propagate any government. They are meant to propagate individuals. If preceding the elections, the government announces huge largesses, costing the exchequer crores and crores of rupees, what can the Election Commission do? Unless, I mean, there is a drastic change in the law, or unless there is a restriction which the political parties and the governments impose on themselves. The example which has been quoted by Dr. Qureshi in his book, he says that during one of the elections in Goa, they received a complaint that the chief minister was appointing somebody as a minister in his cabinet, even when the elections were on. How can you stop the chief minister from discharging his constitutional obligation of appointing a minister? So the chief election commissioner rang up the then chief minister, Mr. Parikar. And Mr. Parikar got very annoyed. And he said, are you saying that I should not do my constitutional duty? So the chief election commissioner requested him. He said, no, sir, we are not asking you to do anything. We are only appealing to your good sense. And he didn't make the appointment. And when he was asked by the media, he said, I have submitted myself to the moral authority of the election. So I think a lot will have to change if we have to improve the quality of our democracy.
Good evening, sir. Sir, I am from UP. The general public does not vote. Instead, the elected BDC members cast their votes in the block Pramukh election. The candidates for block Pramukh always purchase the votes of the BDC members. A single block Pramukh spends crores of rupees to buy BDC votes and later recovers that money from government funds and projects. Since the block office is the first level office for villagers, if there is so much corruption at that level, then how will villages develop? Can the block Pramukh election be conducted through direct voting by the common people, not by BDC, to stop such fraud and corruption?
The Election Commission's view on having ballot paper vote.
The days of ballot paper are over, and that the system of electronic voting machine adopted in India for the last 21 years at the national level has served the process quite well, and that it should not be discarded in favor of ballot papers. Well, that is the kind of, what you are saying is what many people say, but we need to go into specific country and the reason why they don't use the EVM. I don't think there is one answer for all the countries. There are different answers. Even in the US, where people say, I think there are some states in which electronic voting machines are used. Even internet voting is allowed in many countries. But the EVM has served the country well. After 2004, all the general elections and state assembly elections have been conducted through the EVM. There are, I think, more than 40 cases which have been filed in various courts in the country in which people have raised issues, doubts about EVM. Not even in one case has any court made any adverse observation on the EVM. Now, that doesn't mean that there cannot be any improvement in the system. certainly there can be improvement, because after all, technology keeps evolving. So there is a need for continuously putting the existing procedure under a scanner to see whether there are any loopholes and whether they need to be plugged. But what I understand from my own experience is that the electronic voting machine voting system in India is a combination of technology and the administrative procedure which are prescribed and observed in the manufacture, in the movement, in the handling of these machines. And I think a combination of both gives you a lot of confidence that so far I don't think there has been manipulation in India. Whether there can be manipulation, that is difficult to say because you don't know how technologies change. So that is why I am of the view that the existing procedure should undergo rigorous and continuous scrutiny.
To what you said, that Ambedkar also talked about if we can have a prerequisite or a qualification for our representatives. But how do you see that even if we would have had it, do you think that anti-defection law could have served the purpose? Because this is more like reducing our representative to the devotee of the parties, which you were very, I mean, kindly referred that we don't know that what is the structure of that, what is the legality of that, but I don't hesitate to call that it's nothing more than a private limited company these days. At the same time, how do you think that if there could have been a prerequisite or a qualification for our legislature, how anti-defection law is eroding that, one. Second, that now after anti-defection law coming into place, don't you think that our legislature is just a procedural, like one of the person who was asking, because executive is someone who is kind of legislating now. Because we saw in this session also that discussion time of one of the bills were 6 minutes, 2 minutes, 4 minutes, and this is how bills are getting passed. So what are your views on this? And just one more question on this. Unless we have representatives like that, we'll have this kind of rule in place that as a person who is accused or who is in jail, they can contest election, but they cannot vote. The reason mentioned is only talk about that there was a case also, that Pradhan case, that it, so unless we have such kind of lawmakers, we'll have these kind of laws. Like if you have if you are in jail just on the presumption of innocence, you can be stripped out of that. And also in context of 130th Amendment where these accused people can be in jail. Thank you.
So first of all, I think the issue of educational qualification and anti-defection, they are not related to each other. My personal view is that educational qualification is not required to be an elected representative. It is another matter that by policies of universal literacy, eventually everybody will acquire some kind of literacy in the country. But the quality of a legislator's work is not determined by the amount of educational qualification that he has, right? Now, as far as the anti-defection law is concerned, I think it's a complicated debate because this law was brought in to deal with a certain kind of behavior which was observed. Whether that law should continue the way it is, whether there should be changes in that law, I think it's a debatable issue. For example, in the election of president and vice president, the whip doesn't apply, right? So there is a scope for what is called as a conscience vote. So I don't have a ready-made answer to what the replacement law for anti-defection should be, or that the law should be completely scrapped. I'm not sure about that because you also need political stability. in the country. What was your third question? Yeah, about not having the facility to vote if you are in the jail. I thought it's, I mean, not a big issue because of this. I mean, you want polling booths to be set up in the jail, and even if your name exists in an electoral roll, so how many polling booths should be set up in the jail? In any case, my understanding is that the right to vote, which is guaranteed by the Constitution, is a statutory right, right? So it is not, you are deprived because you are in jail. I mean, as simple as that. Just as you are deprived if you are of insane mind. I'm not saying the two are related, but I mean, these are the practicalities of the situation.
Sir, in recent the voter data or the CCTVs after 5 p.m. cannot be released because there may be your mother or sister or something like that, which looked quite ridiculous, number one. Number two, his body language was, he was almost very furious on the mic, looked as though he was under terrific pressure. And the way he was talking was so reckless that he doesn't care for anybody. Is there any rule that these clippings are the data, when about 1 lakh people still come after 5 o'clock and vote? It is accepted and they don't release the thing. How can this be combated? Number one. The second question is, either in the Constitution or any other rule, is there any way the Chief Election Commissioner can be impeached?
The Chief Election Commissioner can be impeached. So that provision is very clearly there in the Constitution. As far as the data of people who vote after 5 o'clock is concerned, if you look at the presiding officer's diary, the number of people who vote after the closure of poll is available in the presiding officer's diary. So it is not as if that data is not disclosed. The number of slips which are issued to people who are in the queue at the close of poll, that data is available. And the instructions are very clear that you will give the slip to the last person in the line and then come towards the polling station. But whether the CCTV footage of that process should be released or not, I don't know what purpose that CCTV footage will serve. What complicated the issue or what made it a little contentious was that the rule was changed when a petition had been filed in the Punjab and Haryana High Court asking for CCTV footage. And the impression gathered was that in order to avoid a court order demanding or ordering that the CCTV footage should be released, the rule was changed. That the disclosure would not include CCTV footage. Because by the way, the CCTV coverage was introduced more as a matter of internal management by the authorities. I don't know what purpose the release of CCTV footage will serve. I'm unable to understand that. So therefore, I don't actually buy that argument that all CCTV footage should be made public. By the way, even the disclosure of Form 17 and the request for uploading Form 17 on the ECI website. I think it's a demand or a request which has been made without giving proper thought. What will you gain if more than 1 million Form 17s are uploaded? Because in any case, that Form 17 is already available with the polling agents of all the candidates. So it is not as if it's a document not in the public domain. But yes, what makes sense is for the Election Commission to publish the voter turnout data, polling station wise, a few days after the polls are concluded. Because Form 17 is available. Form 17 is scrutinized by the observer and the returning officer. And after that, Election Commission gives the voter turnout data. So once Form 17 has been scrutinized and it has been decided that there is no re-poll required, what is the harm in disclosing to the people that this polling station had 900 electors, 400 voted? What do you lose in disclosing that data? So I think that probably makes towards better transparency.
Mr. Lavasa, one of the important responsibilities of the ECI is perhaps to maintain a level playing field between the parties who are participating in an election. There is a perception, I believe, that in this area there has been a reduction in the intensity of implementing the requirement in the recent past. What are your views in this regard?
The Chief Election Commissioner in the press conference, he said that we have exempted 2 persons from this party and 2 persons from that party. That was level playing field, no? But the question is, and there is one more thing which I think we need to think of. It was decided to give notice to the party for a complaint which was received against individuals. If you are not satisfied about the complaint, why should you give a notice to the party? You give a notice to the party because you find that there is some grain of truth or merit in the complaint. And therefore you are telling the party that we are requesting you or exhorting you to not let your star campaigners do this and that. So how do you adopt a system by which it's like a parent-teacher meeting? So you can scold the parent, but you will exempt the student. So I think these things don't help the commission at all. And therefore, as far as the model code of conduct is concerned, although there are some people who believe that model code of conduct should be scrapped, there are some people who believe that expenditure limit should be scrapped. I don't subscribe to that view. For whatever it is worth, it has its own value. But surely Election Commission can adopt a system by which all the complaints of model code violations which are received should be put on the website the day they are received. And there should be a predetermined procedure to say that this complaint will be dealt within 48 hours, this complaint will be dealt within 72 hours, and this will be the procedure that we will follow. We will ask for a preliminary report within 24 hours, whatever. And then take whatever decision you want and again put it on the website. Let people decide. You see, it's better for people to disagree with the Commission's decision. than to be kept in suspense and therefore getting more and more disenchanted. It's better to say that, yes, we believe that there is no violation. That's it. You may not like it. In any case, when you take a decision or when any court takes a decision, half the people are satisfied, half people are not satisfied. So it's better to take decisions and be transparent about it. But on a lighter note, have you heard the name of Sir W.G. Grace? He was a very famous cricketer of England. And when he was about to retire, his village called him to play an exhibition match. And he went, a huge crowd had gathered to see him. And this poor fellow, he was out on the first ball. So the umpire raised his finger. So Sir Grace walked up to the umpire and said, "Do you think these people have come to see your umpiring?"
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I think that's a perfect note which to end the lecture. Thank you so very much for the lecture. Thank you so very much for responding to each question in detail.